Okay, hello. Wait a minute. Oh, maybe. So, welcome here. Thank you for coming. The title of the lecture is Where No Man Has Gone Before, because we are making something that most other companies didn't try on this scale, and there is a lot of space for failure. And basically I'm going to speak about those failures of ours. But first, something about me, to those who don't know. I studied at the School of Applied Arts. I studied art history. I was a director and screenwriter on Mafia series, especially the first one. Now I'm co-founder and creative director at Warhorse, and we are making this little game called Kingdom Come Deliverance. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a realistic medieval historical role-playing game, which is surprisingly something no one did before. If you think about it and try to come up with any game that's set in history that's more than 200 years ago, and it's not a strategy game, you will realize that there is none. Maybe Assassin's Creed, and it's science fiction. It's also RPG without fantasy, and it's set in real-world setting, which is really a real-world setting. So most of the stuff is actually really as it looked or looks today. We also have real historical events, and we are focusing on accuracy and authenticity. So it's also a little complication when you are making things. And on top of that, we have a physics-based combat. And we are late by 2 years right now. So why we are late? And I will try to cover up all the things that we faced and how we overcome them and why it did happen. But first, there are many types of games. There are shooters, there are fighting games, there are stealth games, cinematic adventures, racing games, survival games. Crafting is very popular, or you can have open world RPGs, which is basically all those games combined together. So everything you have in those different genres you can fit into RPG, and it's that much more complicated as if you were creating several other games. Just an example, first-person shooter, you choose setting, you choose an engine. The engine is usually prepared to make a first-person shooter, so you create assets and some content. Basically, the length of the game is usually 8 hours or something. Then you have to have some unique feature that will differentiate you from the other games. And then, here we go, you have a first-person shooter, and you can be famous. In open-world RPG, you choose your setting. You make your own engine, because no engine is able to run the game you are trying to make. Then you have to create content for 100 hours. Then you will choose one feature that you are not going to make because it's really too much. Then you go through hell for several years. And then you listen to complaints from people that this one feature you didn't have is something really important and your game sucks. The planning of development of such a game is also a ridiculous process. You have this big plan, you know how to make it. Before I worked on several games, they were also late. Not because of me, of course, but so you got this idea that you did it before, so now you are going to do it right. But with RPG, you could as well buy a crystal ball, because it's really hard to predict something no one did before. And you choose your target platform and specifications. You do some stress tests, which means that you try if at least some things that you are planning to have are going to run on that platform. Then you start developing, and what happens is that the platform changes, specifications change, the engine changes several times. So basically, all you do is adapt to those changes, and in the end, you give up and release the game. Just to compare several things, this is 2009. It's a Polish game from Techland that I really liked, and it was visually absolutely stunning. It has a great open world engine, and it was one of the engines I was considering to use for our game. This is 2 years later when we were actually starting the development. This is Skyrim. So this was the benchmark at the time how RPGs should look. This is how our game looked in 2011 when we started. This is in 2012 when at this conference somebody took an early demo of a building from our graphic talk, shoot it with a phone, put it on the internet. It has like 1 million views, and every big magazine in the world was saying that this is the next-gen graphics we are going to see in the future. And this is 2017, and despite that it's Ubisoft, it's actually how the game looks. And it's one of my favorite games, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. This is our maybe competition that's going to be released in 2018. It's Red Dead Redemption 2. So everybody probably can say how far over the course of development and or the moment when I started to plan that I'm going to make this game, which was in 2008, 2009. I started to think about it and searching for money and stuff. So that's how big leap forward the technology made. In 2017, we are several engine versions later. We have physical-based rendering, which was something never used back in the time when we started. We have things called SWATI, which is basically real-time radiosity lighting system, which is also something I never even dreamed of that we could have. We have infinite viewing distance, proprietary pathfinding that we had to do, proprietary AI that we have to do, proprietary indoor and stealth ready lighting that we have to do, proprietary dialogue system that we have to do, proprietary writing tools that we did, and the game is running, let's say 58 FPS on PC and most of the time 30 on PS4. And we still have some time to go. So this is how the game looks now. This screenshot I just took, I took the camera on top of and took the screenshots. It's not something made by the artist. It's not fake. So let's talk about the process that we did. I always say that the game's development is research and development rather than production. It's a big difference between those two things. If you make a car and you already have plans for it and you already have the factory to build it, you're just putting pieces together and are producing cars. You know how long one car will take you, so you are able to estimate how many cars you are able to produce in what time. When you are doing research and development, you don't know how much time it's going to take you. You just estimate based on previous experience how long it's going to take, which is very complicated. And in case you are doing something you didn't do before and no one else did before, which a lot of the things that we are trying actually are, it's very, very hard. So let's start with different areas of the game. So giant map. We have originally, I wanted to have a map that would be like 3 by 3 kilometers. And then a lead artist came to me like, we can easily do 4 by 4. Yeah, easily. 6 years later, it wasn't that easy. There are, of course, bigger worlds, but none of those worlds have thousands of NPCs that are pretty accurately and complicatedly simulated walking around the world whole time. None of those worlds have a global illumination. None of those worlds have thousands of lights in them. none of them has fighting, stealth, adventure, movie, horse racing simulator in it. So that's really actually what we have. At the beginning, it looked very simple. This is the first version of our AI. It's two-dimensional. Those blue squares are villages. They are connected. Those green and red and like those little squares are people, and they were really walking around doing their daily routines. They could walk, work, dinner, sleep, shop, and it was done in like 3 hours in a very simple language. And the original idea was like, okay, this is simple. We just need to add some animations at pathfinding and it's going to work. It's not. So 3D is not 2D. It's quite easy to tell a sprite to move from position A to B, and it's going to look good because it's a sprite, so it's just move, it doesn't do nothing. Maybe it can play some animation, but when the sprite is replaced with natural-looking photorealistic character that has to move naturally and photorealistically as well, because otherwise it would look terrible. And the character has to overcome three-dimensional obstacles on the way from A to B and synchronize several animations with the environment and other characters. It's super extremely complicated, and especially when this character is not scripted, but when he does what he thinks he should do, and he can change what he's gonna do on the fly. Also, it's a big nightmare to save those characters. So you have 1,000 characters in a map that are doing something at any given moment, and the player could be basically anywhere and could be watching someone doing something, fighting with someone, whatever. And you have to save it, and when the player loads it, it has to look the same. So you have to save 1,000 characters in different states. Each character has hundreds of RPG numbers and calculations running in it. So you have to save insane amount of data. And so the saving is one of the biggest issues we were facing, for example. Then you have this arrow to the knee problem that it may do what it's supposed to do, but it may look really weird. So some of the behaviors may repeat or look weird, unnatural. Then you have to do, so it doesn't, so in Skyrim, my favorite example, there was this guy always telling you, I was adventurer like you, and then I took an arrow to the knee, blah, blah, blah. And he was doing it all the time, like you heard it 100 times in several hours of gameplay. So to avoid this, you need to record more reactions, more voiceovers. You have to prepare more situations for that character, which means hundreds of animations, hundreds of voiceover lines, and in the end, the only thing that the player will see is going to be, well, I used to be adventurer like you once, and then something else. And nobody will realize how much work is behind it. We have the NPCs are also affected by a crime system that we have. So basically the player can destroy the whole world, starts to do some crazy shit, and broke everything that we did. So we have a system that should prevent this. We have a law, we have a guards, we try not to cheat, so they are actually not... in Witcher, for example, when you were in the city and you started to do crazy shit, there was an insta-death. A guy with a crossbow came and killed you. And it is funny because we realized that none of the designers in the room has actually ever tried to do crazy shit in Witcher 2 in cities. So we were all well-behaved, responsible citizens of the city and never tried to kill any non-enemy character. But in our game we wanted to allow player to do this, so we have to create very, very complicated crime system, which is also a cause of a lot of the terrible issues. And then on top of that we have story-based complex quests, which are basically very often going against all those open world systems, because you need something to happen in the quests, and so it's sometimes could be quite linear or scripted, and all the time it collides with those open world systems that are non-linear, non-scripted, and so when those two things meet, it very often causes a lot of troubles. So we basically have a lot of fuck-up prevention systems that are trying to fix all those issues, and it's one of the most or biggest tasks when doing quests is to kind of prepare them to be in the world and work despite everything the player does, I would say. Then we have writing. The game is set in a big living world, and so we have a lot of talking. We have more than 50 actors, 2,000 lines of barks alone. So it means that each single character or actor had to record 2,000 lines of things like, hello, how are you, don't kill me, I give up, do you want to buy potatoes, and such things. Each of those recordings took us approximately 4 hours, and we had to do them 50 times, which is crazy, insane, terrible, the worst job ever. We have 60,000 lines of dialogues, but and it's not everything actually, but those lines could be said by multiple people, so we had to record them 120,000 times. And then you have this Uncanny Valley that's basically you do all those things, everything looks great, and then there's this Uncanny Valley, which means that it's not only visuals. So basically, this arrow to the knee behavior is actually exactly that. So you do all those crazy, complicated systems, but most of the time they are invisible to the player. When everything works, the player just sees how then it works, and he doesn't care how complicated it is. So, but basically, people should react to drawn weapon in cities. Simple thing. But in order to do that, we need to write 20 versions of reactions, how they complain when you have when you draw a weapon in a city. So it cannot be just one sentence, because then you would constantly hear this one sentence over and over and over every second when you were running with a sword in your hand. So we had to record all those sentences with 50 different actors. We have to still have cooldown system to prevent this repetition. So even if you have 20 lines, it starts to repeat after some time. So you have or your random voiceover generator can easily play the same sentence several times. So you have to have some cooldown system, so when one sentence is played once, it will not be played for several minutes until, and you have to choose the different ones. But in the end, player will only register, put down that weapon, man. That's the only thing he will realize, and it will seem like super simple task. Reactions, and you probably, again, when you walk around the city, you see people walking around like in another game. Some of them do some stuff, some of them are just walking, but the thing is that we have reactions for drawn weapon, and low light in the night, stealing, trespassing, pickpocketing, lockpicking. Henry as a friend, people say, hello Henry, how are you, and stuff. Injured Henry, dead body found, item on the ground, they pick it up, or they say, oh, what's this? And they look if it's important. When they speak with other people, when they see bandits, when they are under attack, a lot of, and that's not all. So as I said, 2,000 lines of dialogues just for those situations. And Uncanny Valley, this is Skyrim 2011. This was the benchmark when we started. This is a couple of years later in Call of Duty, how characters looked. We were already working on the game at the time, and this is how the characters, the nice ones at least, look in the Kingdom Come currently right now. Hand in hand with those visuals goes the quality of animations you have to have, because the better the character looks, the more you're gonna see any weird facial animation that could be there. So when the characters were quite simple, you were happy that they are just moving the lips according to the voiceovers. When they are that complicated and photorealistic, you see any detail that is weird and not realistic, you see it, and it seems actually weirder than ugly character with simple animations, basically. So just the facial animations was a huge thing. I remember that back in 2009-10, we were at Gamescom going around different providers of facial animation motion capture, and it was really, really simple. There was, over the years, there was massive price drop. There was a huge leap forward. Now everybody has much higher expectations, and it's insane amount of work. So basically, when we were at the Gamescom in 2009, it looked like this. When you had more actors, it looked like this. In 2012, it may look like this. It worked, but it was absolutely horrible to actually use those machines during the motion capture, because imagine that you have to give some natural performance as an actor with 5 kilograms of shit on your head. Now, today, it looks like this. It's also weird, but it's very light and much more useful. But still, when you want to kiss someone, or when you want to punch someone, or when you want to just like hug someone, it's also an extreme problem. But in our case, there is another big problem. So when you are making first-person shooter, 1 hour of facial animations for 8 hours of gameplay is the thing, that's your goal. That's the average length of facial animations you're probably going to have in first-person shooter. When you are making an RPG, or our RPG actually, you will have 120 hours of facial animations and voiceovers, which is a little bit more. 120 hours. So there is just this little difference, and of course that even if we had the same budget as Call of Duty, which we don't have, there has to be some compromise, because we have to do 120 times more work than them, at least in this area. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We also have physically based melee combat. We have first-person horse riding. We have alchemy minigame. We have complex crime system. We have clothing system that's absolutely insane. And if I could choose not to do it, I would do it. I would not do it again. This is just an example of one type of armor on a hand. So all those plate armors we have to do for every character, and they have to be compatible in size with any other type of clothes that are going to be under them. So basically, you may make all those 3D models, and then everything kind of sticks out of or goes through the other layers, so it looks terribly, and you have to go like thousands of combinations of clothes to fix it so it looks good. This is just a couple of helmets, and again, the helmet should kind of be compatible with the different things that are in the same area, which is you have to prevent the player to wear a scarf and a helmet at the same time, and all those little things. You have to kind of draw every character that's going to be in the game. I think we have like 700 pieces of clothes, I think. And in the end, it looks like this when everything works. Then I had this great idea that we have battles as well. Back in 2011, my idea was, okay, we will put, today everybody says, Dan is stupid, he didn't plan the battle development very good. We had a lot of issues with it. It should have been planned much better. So, for example, we should have dedicated team on the battles since the beginning. Well, my plan was to have dedicated team for the battles since the beginning in 2011. But somehow it didn't happen. It didn't happen because the dedicated team wouldn't have nothing to do in the first year, for example, because a lot of other technologies were not prepared. So basically they would have to just sit and think how one day they will do it. So basically when everything was ready, we started to do battles. Before that, it would be pointless. We made some stress tests in 2012, but at the time we didn't have the clothing system at least finish, so the stress tests were quite misleading. So we had 100 something characters running on the scene, and it looked quite good and was running reasonably fast, but nobody knew what will be the hardware specifications of the next generation of consoles at the time. So it was running on the PC, and we couldn't do the stress test on the consoles. And in the end, when we had the consoles, we realized, 60 is a much better number. Not for the players, but for us definitely. And now we have to overcome massive problems, how to make it run reasonably enough with the resources we had, and we didn't knew upfront what the resources going to be. The same goes with lighting. Normally, you would have pre-baked lights. That's something that's used in most first-person games that are set in linear world where the weather and lighting doesn't change. It looks awesome, but the disadvantage is that you cannot have weather changes, day-to-day changes, and all those things. So we have, in open world, we have to have adaptable lights that could change anytime. Weather can change, so we're going to have real-time lights. At the time when we were starting the game, we were evaluating all the engines, like we tested Unreal, CryEngine, Unity, there were several others, Unigine, I don't know, it was like 6, 8 engines, different engines that we tried, and Ogre, I think, and CryEngine at the time has the best lighting. I guess that at the time it could have 12 real-time lights at the same time, something that Unreal couldn't do. So we chose CryEngine. In the meantime, everything changed. Physical-based rendering came, SWOT came, a lot of everything totally changed. So the stress tests were absolutely pointless. If we didn't do them, it wouldn't matter at all. So in the end, we are using physical-based rendering, real-time lighting. We have something called SWOT, which is basically global illumination system. But all those things look great outside, but they look not so great in the inside. And pre-baked lights look much better. So 3 days ago, I was watching Let's Play of Mafia 2, and I was blown away how good the interiors looked. 7 years ago, I guess it's 7 years. So the lighting in the interiors were absolutely stunning, even compared to today when most of the games have real-time lighting. So right now, basically, we are trying to, with real-time lighting, we are trying to catch up to something that we did 7 years ago with pre-baked lighting, and it's quite hard. So, for example, outside it looks great, inside it looks bad, so you start to do some things how to kind of improve it. So we have reflex light. So basically you put in the holes in the room, in the windows, in the doors, you put some special lights that basically reflect what's outside to the inside, so it's kind of looked like there's a special lighting in the inside, which isn't. We have probes that basically reflect the area or the lighting that's going on them from the area back to the area and such things. I don't even understand how it works. I'm just making this stuff up because I'm not an artist. We have spotlights. So basically when you have there's a difference. There's a omni light and spotlight, I guess, or whatever. But when you have a torch, it looks very good when the torch actually shines on everything all around it, 360 degrees, and casts shadows. But casting shadows 360 degrees around is extremely hardware demanding. So for the player, we started to develop torches that are only putting light in front of the player, but then there's this weird thing that the light from the torch is casting shadow from the actual hand and from the actual torch, which wouldn't happen in real world the same ugly way as it happens in 3D engine. So we had to put the light somewhere else than the torch, so the shadow is casted somewhere where it probably doesn't see, and it looks better. So these are the things that we are facing every time. The torches that are stuck to the walls of the buildings are casting light only in one direction, and a lot of them don't cast shadows because when the guards go around with actual additional torches, it slows down terribly and it's absolutely horrible. And in a real open world system that's simulated, we can hardly predict when it's going to happen that several people with torches will meet in one place next to several other torches that are already stuck on the wall. And then consoles, which are always great with their 3 gigabytes of memory and stuff. So you have to lower the memory footprint and do all those things. Another thing is that when you have a dialogue system, which we have with branching dialogues, and we want to make it look good. So we are switching cameras, we have depth of field, we are trying to have kind of this cinematic feeling even when you are talking with someone on the street. So it's not just like first-person view of someone, but cameras are switching and everything looks great. But it only looks great when they are standing in a good lighting. When it's night, or when they are in the shadows, or when they are in some weird location, it looks terribly because there's no light falling on them, and even the global illumination system is not good enough to light them properly as they would look in a cutscene, for example. So we came with a system that we called 3PL, which is basically artificial lighting that we start when the character is in the darkness, and we want to make him look a little bit better. Awesome idea. It was mine. It was great. I was like, I solved it. Somebody now just needs to do it, and it's going to be great. It worked in like 40% of cases. In the rest, for example, in the night you see ghosts all everywhere because the people were plastically, unnaturally white, absolutely horrible. So you were in a dark room and all of a sudden you see a shining bluish ghost coming to you. So we were like, okay, so we had to detect amount of lighting in the area, and then we will lower the amount of lighting the system produces so it looks natural. Then all the characters on the light, on the sun looked black. So then we decided we will not use it, but it looked even worse. So then we set it to like 15% of its possible power, so it looks enough bad in worst case scenarios, but it doesn't look that good in best case scenarios. So it's a compromise, and it still pisses me off because I know that somehow it could be solved if we had two more years or something. And of course we have stealth, and we have this real-time lighting everywhere, and so somehow we need to calculate how much light is casted on the player, which seems absolutely simple, of course, but then you realize it isn't at all. So our lead programmer started to do experiments. He had some probe basically on the player that calculated how much light is falling on him, which worked perfectly during the day. Because during the day, the amount of lumens is, 1,000 or something. So the scale of darkness and lighting was like from 600 to 1,000. But in the night, thanks to our eye adaptability, those values lowered to 0 to 60. And nothing worked. Basically, when you are 61, you are absolutely visible, and it's painfully bright light in the night, while in the day it's 1,000. And we were not able to mix those values, like to realize when it's night, when it's day. And even when we did somehow put some system that says to the lighting system, okay, it's night, the values should be vynásobeny by 10. And I was like, okay, we made it, now it's gonna work. But in the basement during the day, when there is no lighting from the outside, it looks like a night, but the system tells the game that it's a day, so everything's the numbers, the values are insanely high, and everybody sees you from like 50 meters, and you are in absolute darkness. So in the end, we had to do a compromise that in some dark areas during the day, you are simply visible. It's not possible to do it any other way. Or we could spend another 2 years trying to fix that. In our game, you are also able to loot everything from dead NPCs. And that's the reason why we have this complicated clothing system. So when you steal a piece of cloth from a dead character, it disappears from his actual model, and you can see naked people lying around when you loot all their gear and stuff. And it's awesome, and it's the cause of absolutely terrible pipeline that poor character artist has to go through. And as I said before, if I could change this decision, I would made it. But in the end, it's an advantage for us. But it also means that, and it always pissed me off when you play a game, you kill someone in a shiny armor with a great weapon, and then you click on him and you loot him, and there is 2 coins. So I was like, no. In our game, you could take everything from this character, all the pieces of clothing he has, all the weapons, everything he has, you can pick it up. But again, kind of, you can by accident kill some rich guy at the beginning of the game, and then you don't have to care about the economics to another 100 hours until the end of the game. Basically, I don't know which was the game I played. Luckily I picked a sword at the beginning of the game, and for remaining 120 hours, the sword was still the best weapon in the game. So that's something I would like to avoid. So in order to avoid this, we had to have some pretty strong economic systems behind the game. So, for example, you can loot a lot of stuff from the people. If you kill several enemies, you can pick up, I don't know, 10 swords, 15 different armors, and all those things are very expensive, so you can go to the merchants, but they don't have enough money because they are village merchants and they don't buy, they are not US Army to buy all the weapons you can provide them. But there was an exploit. You can trade armor for the stuff they had. So we had to prevent this, and they will not buy your stuff even as an exchange with the stuff they have. Also, the things are damaged during the combat, so the damage lowers reasonably the price of the item you are selling. And according to that, the repair kits should be expensive, so it wouldn't be another exploit to just pick up broken stuff, buy a cheap repair kit and fix it and sell it very expensively. Also, and it was very expensive, very complicated to do, merchants are specialists, so they don't buy everything from everyone. They only buy stuff that they are selling. That was something that looks very simple, but it wasn't in our open world system. I also am constantly fighting with the rest of the designers about the pricing of stuff, which is funny. Expensive piece of armor in medieval times could cost, I don't know, 44,000 groschen. Whore for a week would cost you 6. So, or food for a week would cost you 3. Cheap horse would cost you 100. So basically the basic needs of a person like food, sleep, basic clothing are extremely cheap in the game. And other things are extremely expensive on the other hand. So by selling one sword, you can make a living for several months. How do we prevent this? Do we want to prevent this? I preferred to keep the actual medieval prices. So basically food and sleeping in pubs or medieval hotels is extremely expensive, but we have to balance it somehow else. So basically, we had to set what are going to be the driving mechanisms behind the player's economics. So it's basically repairing stuff, buying new gear, and paying for crimes that the player commits. Basically, when you do something evil, you will most likely not get out of it cheaply. So when you kill someone in a village, you can run away, but when you return to the village, they will recognize you and they will try to arrest you again. So if you do something terrible in some place, it's easy to avoid being catched, but if you want to do something in this area, you have to somehow face the consequences. So you could be arrested, you can pay the price for that, you can go to prison, and then it's okay. But basically, the price for the crime should be high enough to kind of counterbalance the advantage that the player had from the actual crime. And that's also something not very easy to set up properly. Of course, we did a lot of calculations. What's the total sum of money and items the player can get or steal to kind of know what's the total amount of value the completionist player could get in the game. And all those things are the reason why RPG games are not popular amongst developers. This is my favorite picture. This is me 15 years ago. This is me on Mafia 1. This is me when we started Kingdom Come, and this is me now. I would say that all these things are terrible. There is a horrible risk that you are facing when you do all those things. There is a lot of opportunities to screw up. But in the end, I would say that when it works, it's the most advanced art form. And I mean RPG, not just a game. RPG is probably the king discipline in game making because it basically has or could have most of the stuff that all other games have. Just to mention, we have great artists. We were doing medieval illuminations. We were recording symphonic orchestra. We were recording actual folk songs with folk groups. We have 4 hours of movie in the game that is basically, I would say it's a good movie, actually. We have lots of dialogues. We have mini games that could be probably standalone games on mobile platforms, for example. There's a lot of writing, a lot of interesting stories. There's a lot of moral choices. So it's kind of like it has everything. It has all those things that movies have and other different disciplines and mix them together. So I would say it's worth the risk. The problem is that when you think that you are a genius and nobody did it before because they are stupid and you are the one that can make it, most of the time all other people, even those who are working with you, will think that you are an idiot, and it's not going to work because there is no example anywhere that it actually worked. So you have to ignore them and do it anyway. But there is a risk that you are really an idiot and it's not going to work. So it's really hard to see the different, spot this line between you are an idiot and you are a genius. So let's hope in our case it's going to be the better option. So thank you very much. I think that there is a... And we have, I guess, 10 minutes for the questions, if anyone has.
Yes, that's correct. Some questions in the audience? Okay, there.
Hi, so first, thank you for a great speech. It was really interesting. And I noticed one thing. You said the weapons can get damaged, so it lowers their price. My question is, does it even lower their durability, and can they break?
Yes. Actually, everything gets damaged. So if you pick up food, it gets rotten over time. And it was also another funny thing that, for example, just last week we realized that we don't know what the number that we are setting up means, actually. There is a number quality, which means how quickly it's going to get damaged. In case of weapons, it's how many clashes with other weapon it's going to withstand. In case of food, it means how long will it take until the food is rotten. And nobody knew what this number means. So we set quality to 80 and it never get broken. We set it to 79 and it broke in 10 minutes. So that's something we were setting up last week. But yeah, it works on every single item in the game. So everything gets damaged or broken or rotten, and you need to have this in mind.
That's fucking awesome. Thank you.
It's basically, the idea is, for example, if you kill a cow, which is huge, like 500 kilograms of meat, in games it will in other games it will give you one piece of meat. In our game it will give you 500 kilograms of meat, very heavy leather skin, and even some special like horns or something. So it will give you like half a ton of stuff. So if you pick half a ton of meat and sell it to the butcher, you would probably get very rich. But you cannot carry half a ton of stuff. So the cow is going to stay there, so you can return to it, but it's going to get rotten when you return. So the meat is going to be unconsumable and nobody will buy it from you. So that's also part of the economics, at least in theory.
All right, there were another question.
Okay, so you talked about how much investment you put into the game and a huge, impressive amount of work you put in there. So my question is, what's your feeling about games that put much less effort, yet they end up with a similar success?
Or bigger, much bigger.
Or bigger, yeah.
This year I was on a yacht of a guy who made basically Elastomania rip-off and made 200 million euros out of it. And he bought an 8 million yacht, and he told me that he wants a bigger one for 16 million. And I was sitting there like, yeah, you did it in 2 people in several months. I'm working on it for 6 years with 130 people or something, and the results could be much worse. So, but that's how the world works. So I don't feel any envy or something like that. It's just like he's lucky, and there's about 10 million other guys who tried and failed. So I just was lucky that I met the one who succeeded. And I would say that here the probability that's generally, let's say that there's a big chance of doing huge success with very little effort in mobile games, but the chance to screw up is like 1,000 times bigger than when you are making bigger game, because there's less competition in bigger games, and the quality affects much more the success. So there's still chance to screw up or not make enough money or whatever, but the chance is smaller than when you are making. The risk is a little bit smaller, the effort is bigger, and the final result is a little bit maybe lower, but the risk is smaller.
So, if you rob a trader and you're trying to sell these items on the other corner of the map, 4 kilometers, the other trader, how they react to this? They think these things are...
I don't understand. Sorry.
You say that if you steal some
yes.
items, it's difficult to sell it. But if you sell it in the one corner of the map and trying to trade in the other corner of the map, 4 kilometers, how the other trader...
It works.
It works?
Yeah, so... Again, in theory, in practice, it works. So when you steal an item, depending on its price, the item has some cooldown system. It's flagged as stolen, and it also knows where it was stolen. So merchants in this area will know that if the item is expensive enough, they will realize that it's a stolen item and they will not buy it from you. But if you go to another area, they will buy it from you. And they will not recognize it as stolen. So it really works like that.
Dan, how specifically did you research medieval prices? I mean, how do you get to know that bread is this price and horse is this price?
It's very vague. The information is very vague, but there are some for example, textbooks or such things where they counted people's property, or when they mention that they made some big deal. So basically, we know the kind of costs of basic items like eggs, chicken, horse, cow, and such things. And we also know the pricing of, like, you could say that cheap average sword would be like 100. That's what we know. I don't know exactly how the really fancy ones costed, but so that's where we kind of extrapolated as we liked. But generally, the pricing, the cost of living, the salaries of different people, it's something that's known. That was recorded.
Okay, thank you. It was Dan Vávra from Warhorse Studio. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.